All right, today you're going to be working with some graphing skills. All of Chapter 4 is referring to some form of graphing. We're starting off with some T-charts there. So maybe you remember T-charts previous information. It essentially is just a fancy T with an X and a Y. So I'll be helping you structure that to be able to do your graphing. Got a total of 12 problems, I believe, and I think I might help you with 6, so you only have half of it for your actual homework. All right, so we're going to look at number 1 here. We've done this before in the reference of our reflections, but now we're getting a little bit closely related to our actual graphing with our T-charts. So about this one again, x equals -2. If all I have to do is make my T-chart over here, and what this is telling me again is simply my x value, the part of the T-chart that has the x, is simply -2. So that's going to be -2, -2, -2. And if you remember about this when we did our reflections, this is actually going to be a vertical line. And the way that I can do that is coming up with some numbers here, anything that I'd like. Most commonly, students simply choose 1, 2, 3. It's just a nice pattern there. So once you have your T-chart completed with these quick problems here, again, we've already done this before, is that you then go ahead and plot your 3 points. So again, -2 is the x, +1 is the y. Previously, we just looked on the x-axis, which would have been -2, 0. I now have -2, +2, and -2, +3. So the thing that's a little bit different about these graphing lines here is I need to use a line that has arrows on both ends. It is going to be vertical like we did before. So use your straight edge, please, with that. And then I need you to go ahead and label your equation next to the line. X equals -2 is going to be right here. And the reason I'm having you practice about labeling your equation on the line is because eventually we will then be graphing 2 lines, and then we need to label them to keep it separate in our thinking. So our first one is done. Again, it is a vertical line, not a line segment. You got arrows on both ends and your equation written there. So for this one, we're going to do the exact same type of work, where we're still going to make a simple T-chart. But this time, if you notice, it tells me y is equal to a number. So it means on the y side, I'm going to have 5s. While on the x side, I would then have my pattern of 1, 2, 3. Oops. What we did previously again is I looked on the y-axis and I went ahead and identified 5 and I made my horizontal line. Here again we're getting a little bit more specific where x is 1, y is 5. You could have done 0, 5 if you want. X is 2, y is 5. X is 3, y is 5. So it obviously does give me my horizontal line like we did before. Got nice arrows there. And label y equals 5. So that form of T-chart should be relatively easy. Some easy points on your quiz coming up for that information. But it's the other types of equations that we will have a little bit more difficulty with. And those are equations in standard form. So we're going to be doing some equations here. 2x plus 3y equals 0. 2x minus 3y equals 9, and so on. So what I'm going to have you do is set up your equation, and then you're going to be, or sorry, your T-chart, and then you're going to do a little bit of work with me to find out those points. Now the way that you're going to do it is you are going to pick your x's when you have both variables visible here. Now the way that you can pick them are as follows. Some students just pick whatever numbers they like, and then they realize that was probably not the best choice because they're probably going to get some fraction answers over here for the y. So what I've taught my students in years past to do is to think about this value here. This value, meaning the coefficient of y, is going to help me pick my numbers. Again, the coefficient of y. Not the coefficient of x. The coefficient of y will help me out. So again, multiple times I was highlighting the 3. So what I'd like you to do then is to go ahead and pick your numbers based off of the 3. You can do 3, 6, 9, but if you notice, I don't have a 9 on my x-axis. So I can do, I think this would be the best idea. -3, 0, and 3. And this is just from years of experience. Not only does this help us out now, but it will also help you out on tomorrow's lesson if you set it up this way. So what I need you to do then is to then solve for y. So it's a little bit of substitution and then solving, very 7th grade like. So I'm going to take my equation here. So if you have small enough writing, you can just show me your work. 2x plus 3y equals 0. But instead of x, I'm just going to go ahead and replace that with my x value. So I'm really going to have 2 times negative 3 plus 3y equals 0. So that gives me a negative 6 plus a 3y equals a 0. So if you notice, it's a two-step equation here, something we did all the way back in chapter 1 and have been doing all year long. So I have 3y is equal to 6. So that means that y is simply equal to 2. So it means I've got my first point out of 3, and then I need to go ahead and solve for my next one. The 0 is probably the easiest one that you can do because we love 0 so much. Because 2 times 0 is just 0, so I don't even really need to worry about that. So I have 3y is equal to 0. I divide. So y is equal to 0. Now, some of you might be able to be using your psychic powers to predict what the next one's going to be. If this is a 2, this is a 0, which means the numbers are decreasing. So that means this number here, what do you think that's going to be? Now, the only reason that I can use my psychic powers here is because I have made a really good set of x's. Negative 3, 0, 3. Again, over the years that I've taught this, we've come to some conclusions that this is very helpful. Reason why, again, is you can use your psychic powers. So I'm asking you to think about it, and let's go ahead and solve it now. So I've got 2 times 3 plus 3y is equal to 0. So I got a simple 6. Solving my beautiful equation. And when I divide, do I get the number that you were thinking about? Y is equal to negative 2. I mean, it was decreasing each time by 2. So 2 decreases to 0, so 0 decreases to negative 2. What you're going to do now then is, just like we did on the other t-charts, is we're going to go ahead and plot our points. So the first one is x is negative 3. So I go negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. And y is 1, 2. I put my dot. Ooh, we love the origin 0, 0 right in the center. Very helpful. And then finally, x is 1, 2, 3. Y is negative 1, negative 2. When you make your line, I would like you to go from end to end here. Meaning you can put more dots if you want to, and we'll learn how to do that later on in the year. But again, I want it starting over here and ending somewhere over here. So if I need to adjust it, I will. But looks like mine's pretty good. Again, simply end to end, take your straight edge and line it up. My equation here, again, good practice. I'm going to write it next to my line. And the reason we write it next to the line again is because later on we're going to do 2 lines instead of 1 line. Please make sure you have your arrows there, and then we're good to go. So again, how we pick our x's determines how good our y's are. So on this one here, I'm not going to solve it all the way, but I am going to help you set up your t-chart. It does not matter that this 3 is negative compared to the previous problem that the 3 was positive. I'm still going to go ahead and think about this number here so that I can choose negative 3, 0, 3. I plug in my numbers, and this time it's going to be a 9 instead of a 0, which means you have a little bit more work to do. But the work is going to look exactly like this here. You're going to solve your first one, place it in there. Your second one, the 0, is going to make it a lot easier. Again, whenever you plug in your 0 for your x, a lot easier. And then maybe you can use your psychic powers to predict the third one. We'll practice that again in just a moment. One thing you do have to be careful of, though, is this negative sign when you are solving it. All right, let's look at number 5. We're going to go ahead and make our t-chart. I am going to be careful of the negative sign when I solve it, but if you notice, I have a 2 this time. So my choices should be -2, 0, 2. I think that would be the easiest because, again, we like the 0. The negative one, the first one, will help me determine what my pattern is going to be. Maybe I can predict my last one. All right, so my x value is -2. And if you notice here, it's just a simple x. So that means I can just write it as -2, which is the x, subtract 2y equals 2. Solve it, add 2. -2y. I'm careful on this problem, just like you should be on number 4. Because when I divide by a -2, my y is going to be equal to a -2. Then I do the exact same type of work with 0. So x is 0. So I now have a 0. Subtract 2y is equal to 2. So it means I don't even have to worry about that. So you can technically cover that up if you'd like to. Or you can just write it new as -2y equals 2. Divide by -2. So y is equal to -1. So right now, since we picked really good x's, you should be thinking about your psychic powers to predict the next one. You could even just look at the number line up at the top of the class to see if it will help you. -2, -1, and again, you're predicting this one here. You can only do that, though, again, if you choose your x's like I'm teaching you how to do. So my equation is x minus, so I have 2 minus, or 2 subtract 2y is equal to 2. Subtract the 2 from both sides. So that gives me -2y is equal to 0. Divide by -2. So y is equal to 0. And that should have been the number that you were predicting for your t-chart there. All right, so let's go ahead and plot it. I've got -2, -2. I've got x is 0, y is -1. X is 2, y is 0. Make your answer, which is your graph. Oops, notice how mine's a little bit off, so I do need to go ahead and adjust that. You should have a better time with yours because you are using a straight edge. Again, making it the best that I can. And then labeling it as x subtract 2y is equal to 2. And I might have enough time for one more. Going to go ahead and set up my t-chart there. Looking at my coefficient of y, lets me set it up as -5, 0, 5. And then I plug it in. Again, I have 4 times -5, because that's the x value, plus 5y equals -25. So it gives me -20. So if you notice, it's a repeat of all of the information we've been doing with solving equations and so on. It's just how do you solve it if you don't have your numbers? And that's how you're picking these numbers here. So I've got a 5y is equal to a -5. Divide. So y is equal to a -1. Again, we love the zeros. The zeros really help us out. Sorry, running out of room over here. I've got 4 times 0. And that really doesn't matter at all. So I just have 5y is equal to -25. So it means that y is equal to -5. You might be able to predict it there. as I'm hurrying here to try and finish. So I've got 20 plus 5y is equal to negative 25. Subtract 20. So that gives me 5y is equal to negative 45. Divide by 5, so y is equal to negative 9. So I quickly plot it because I got to go as well. So x is negative 5, y is negative 1. X is 0, y is negative 5. X is 5, y is negative 9. Ooh, so this one I just got to kind of estimate where do I think it's going to be. Maybe like that. Take my straight edge. All three should line up, which means if they don't all line up, then I do need to adjust it. And then I label it there. All right, you're going to do the exact same thing for your remaining problems. Please pick your x values for your t-chart based off of the coefficient of y. I know that's something a little bit different, but you do need to do it that way. All right, good luck.